Hi students, the next topic we're going to talk about is lawmaking. And yes, this is the Donald Trump doll that we discussed in class. We talked about a republic versus constitutional monarchy. We also talked about Donald and his outlandish latest comments about disinfectant. So, where do we start? Legislation. Depending on what university you end up going to, it'll be very much about how laws are made. There are three real areas that laws are made, but in essence there's really two. Most laws are made through Parliament, about 90%, state and federal. They call them legislation, statutes or acts. Depends who's teaching you and what you're reading, but those terms are pretty interchangeable. They just end up being laws which have definitions, the dates the laws were made, section numbers and the year of the act. Obviously at times parliamentarians aren't experts, so they go through cabinet and they'll delegate lawmaking to other people. An example of that is you're the emergency services minister. You might delegate to Motorola, who make phones and radios, to build a new frequency and write laws about the new use of the new radio network. Delegation means to have other people. Doesn't always mean lower, just means delegate to someone that's a specialist. So it might be the council, might be Australia Post, might be consulting with the police about having taser guns or pepper spray. But you delegate to them to assist you in forming some new legislation, and then there's a process to having that enacted and proclaimed. The judicial arm is our courts, federal and state predominantly. They make common law, case law, judge-made law, and both original precedents, binding precedents, and persuasive precedents. A binding precedent means from a higher court to lower courts. A persuasive precedent is from a lower court to higher courts. An original precedent means for the first time. The other key thing that judges do is they make sense of the laws of Parliament. So they're forever looking at things like legislation and statutes or acts and making sense of them. Those of you that watch my slides on case law, there's a famous example of the definition of a driver and for drink driving, and it was deemed someone being towed in a vehicle with a tow rope. If they are intoxicated, they are actually committing the offence of drink driving. So a judge interpreted the law as to what does it mean to drive, and it was deemed that that was in charge of a vehicle or in control of a vehicle. I suppose over time, vehicle itself has been defined in many ways and has to be expanded out to such things as motorised eskies, golf buggies, motorised bicycles can all commit the offence of drink driving and road traffic offences. Legislation is made by parliaments, both state and federal. For theatre, we talk about all of the agitation and review of law. Most laws go through both houses pretty much untouched, and it's often good law, and it's through a constitutional government system of a two-house system, usually with two parties. The House of Reps have 151 members at the moment, but it's normally 150, and the Senate, which is the Red House, have 76. You need to get half of the members of both houses to agree with a bill for it to be passed. So you need 76 members in one house and 39 members in the other house. Sometimes those members can be a mixture of your major party and Greens and independents. Sometimes it's just your party itself has a majority. So during the John Howard era, he had a majority of Liberal and National members in the lower house and upper house, and that gave him a rubber stamp government. But most times it's the Labor Party or Liberals in charge of one house and the opposite in the other house, and we call that a hostile Senate. And the Senate therefore is a true house of review that was originally set up to protect the states. The House of Reps, for obvious reasons, controls supply bills, because if you let the The lower house in particular must control them because the upper house or the Senate, who protect the states, would look after themselves. So supply bills is the spending of money and taxes and revenue. So there's lots of controls on that the House of Reps control that. And it's equally spread amongst the states and territories. This is a really key thing for those in first year law or those in legal studies. Our Parliament has 4 functions. The major one is it's a representative government. Members of the Parliament represent us and make laws on our behalf, both social cohesion, social progress. So to live in harmony and to provide for the future. Obviously, social cohesion and social progress plays a part in legislation being a key function of law making. So to make laws is the legislative function, and they're both public and private laws. The supply function I've already discussed, but it's the passing of money bills, and predominantly that is things to do with taxation, imports and exports and trade. The scrutinising function has 2 real key areas. One is that we have 2 houses, and within each house we have 2 parties. So the scrutinising and review of bills is quite thorough to ensure that the bills are good laws, whereby both parties and even the members of the public are consulted as to why those laws are necessary. Laws come from anywhere and everywhere. Pressure groups, Greenpeace, lobby groups, protesters, the Greens Party, the REPAT were pressure groups. The media are forever initiating and pressing for new legislation about parolees, extensive incarceration periods for serious crime. We saw that recently with the 4 police run over. The media propaganda of him and the jail and the maximum sentence was all over the media. On the right-hand side, the electoral mandate is really, really important, which is a promise at election time, and the desire of your political party is important. Class at the moment are looking at the Royal Commissions, both the stolen children and the deaths in custody, and obviously the United Nations puts pressure on us about racism, equal rights for women and children. Next slide just simply says that all laws start off as bills, they're debated, and they must pass in the perfect form. If they're corrected or modified in any way, they go to the original house. Once it's passed by both houses, it becomes an act, and once it's an act, it becomes a law once proclamation, which means signed by the Governor or Governor-General, whether it's state or federal, and it's given gazette, which means it's announced to the public in a parliamentary document. The date of the law coming into being and the approval of the Parliament and government and Governor or Governor-General really gives essence to that law. It also gives the public readiness or time to prepare for a new law. Types of bills. The majority are public bills from government drafted by the OPC. They're usually in areas of interest of the politician or their portfolio, e.g. the Education Minister. He'd be putting out lots of new laws at the moment about COVID. Private members' bills are non-members that are not in government, usually backbenchers or independents. They're not as easy to succeed because you don't have government backing, but if they're good laws and you've canvassed the other politicians well, private members can get bills through on areas. Often they're areas that you have to vote with your conscience. 4 types of public bills. Original bills for the first time, such as the 50k zone. Amending or changing bills due to them being dated. Repealing bills because, again, they may be dated or no longer needed. And consolidating bills, putting lots of acts into one new bill. That was an example of that is Controlled Substances Act for South Australian Police, which oversees all drug laws. There used to be 3 or 4 different acts to oversee drugs in Adelaide. Supply bill is a big one. That's the one that only the House of Reps can control, and that's to do with spending money and taking out loans for the country. Politicians are like team members of a netball team or football team. They vote along party lines, they discuss bills before they go into Parliament, and they vote as a team. If you vote against your party, you could be banished to the back bench and come next election not be put up for election. The only time you can really cross the floor is on a conscience vote. That's where you vote on your own morals and own values. If it is a conscience vote, they can't hold you to account in the sense that there's no party discipline. You're just free to vote how you wish. We talked about today that could be over abortion, homosexuality, gay marriage, so things that are quite contentious for some people in society. MPs are freed up to vote. We saw that with the plebiscite, with the latest, the ability to marry for gay couples. The majority of bills, again, are voted upon by the voices and members of Parliament yelling out yay or no. They're nodding, and the Speaker or President, as to where the bill originates, will identify there's no challenge and that bill would proceed. If it needs to be a formal vote, it's just where there's a challenge or a speaker, and then they call for a division. If there's a division, people need to move to either side, and you can actually see who's voting for and against a bill. Members of the Parliament, the bells ring in Parliament. The Parliament then locks those out that don't get there, and you do have a physical division. So you can see the importance of being in Parliament if it's a contentious bill and your leader needs you there to vote. Names are recorded and are put in Hansard, and obviously a count is taken. So, I hope you enjoyed the law-making slides. They've been placed on Sector and are available for any of you wanting to use Teams. And if you've got any questions, let me know. We'll have a look at the black ball. Will all students hand in their papers tomorrow by the due date, electronically and via Turnitin? Well, that's pleasing. The answer is yes. Thank you.